Welcome back to another Guns Contractors video, and this one I want to talk about probably the biggest change that's coming to our industry for many years, and that is the removal of the rebated fuel allowance. So that's fancy words for basically we're not going to be allowed to use red diesel in our construction machinery across the board. It's almost easier to list the people who are going to be allowed to use it from the 1st of April 2022, which is the deadline, looming now as I record this in March, and the industry is just starting to wake up to the reality of that and what that's going to mean, not just for small contractors such as myself. I mean, in a way I'm the luckiest one because I only run small equipment, but right across the board to the people in quarries, people in the waste industry, in the recycling industry, and the much broader spectrum of people who work under the banner of construction, of which the rebate is going to be removed. It'll have a significant increase on costs and also some maybe hidden implications that we're all starting to realise now. So I'll explain. So from the 1st of April 2022, the red diesel is no longer rebated diesel, because there is other options as well I'll talk about in a minute. Rebated diesel is no longer allowed to be used in construction machinery. Now, that doesn't actually apply to the machines itself, because it's about their use rather than the actual type of machine. So you can have, and this is where it gets complicated, you can have an excavator working and doing work on a farm, of which agriculture is largely exempted from this change, and will still be able to use red diesel rebated fuel continue as they are now. But that excavator could be working on a farm and allowed to run on rebated fuel, or that same excavator or the same model or whatever could be working in a construction situation and therefore have to use white diesel, of which is taxed at a much higher rate, of course, which is where the word rebated comes into. There's a lot of grey area on this, and really you need to check the Gov website to see how your business fits in. I'm not going to comment on where there might be some grey areas, there may not. As far as I see it, all of my work is going to have to become on white, or the very small amount that might be in that at the moment slightly grey area, I'm going to be using white for, because I don't see the risk in, or the real benefit in, the efforts of trying to run red for that small amount of work that I do. However, your business may well be very different, and I would get on top of this because it's a massive storm coming. Now, it's worth talking about how, in case you're unaware, how the UK fuel tax, and for obviously my overseas viewers, how our tax on our fuel is calculated, to really understand what the difference is going to be between what we used to run on red and what we will in theory be paying when we will have to move to, well, white or other alternatives, as I'll come on to. So currently, I mean, the fuel situation is crazy because of several factors, largely of course the Russian-Ukraine war, which is obviously a terrible situation. What that's done to fuel prices is outside of even what I'm talking about here, and has obviously increased supply issues and all sorts of things. But I'm going to draw a line on where I can do my figures. Obviously, it seems to change daily, and I went past a pump today, gone £1.70 for diesel on the forecourt post. But I've decided to pick the £1.60 a litre, which was, to be honest, what the price was when I worked these figures out when I was looking and researching what this video would be. So, £1.60 a litre, that's what we would pay on what I call the totem pole price, the price that you see on the pump as it stands. Now, that isn't all cost for oil. There is a large amount of tax on that, and in the UK we have two taxes that apply to our fuel. One, of course, is VAT, which is 20% on the entire cost of the fuel. And if you're a contractor like myself, you're registered for VAT, then you can claim that back, which basically largely makes it irrelevant, really. Of course, some people aren't in that situation, which will be, this whole thing will become even worse for them. But in my situation, I can claim the VAT back. Now that takes the £1.60 price that you see on the pump down to about £1.33 without, plus VAT as such. The rest of these figures are all going to be plus VAT figures because it's the only way to really compare. So, UK fuel, road fuel, is on a tax amount at the moment, a fixed rate of 57.95p per litre. So nigh on 58p. God knows who came up with the 0.95 of a pence. That's the government for you, I guess, and how these things are worked out. Anyway, essentially, nigh on 58p a litre, you're paying straight to the government as a fuel tax. What they do with that, I'm not going to go into, but the VAT, by the way, is then applied on top of that amount. So at the moment, they're making an awful lot. I think it's 27p of VAT on the £1.60 litre, and there'd be about 12p of VAT on their own tax. But I will not get political about this. That's just for amusement, a bit of facts down the pub for you. So anyway, fuel at £1.60 pump price. You got 27p of that is VAT on that. If it was that price, comes out about £1.33 plus VAT. You've then got 57p of that is essentially tax. So your costs for fuel are actually not that bad, really, when we think about it. It's the tax that makes it expensive. Now, red is calculated slightly differently. Red attracts a VAT rate of 5%, and generally when people quote red prices, they're always talking plus VAT. So you would think that you could rule the VAT out. There is 11.14 pence per litre of fuel duty on red diesel or off-road diesel, whatever you want to call it. So it should be about 46.8p, if my maths are right, cheaper than white diesel. But of course, it's not, is it? People at the moment, you would expect to have been paying around 75p a litre for that, something like that, if that was the case. But of course it's not, plus VAT that is. It's at like red prices. People are putting online at the moment in the Facebook groups and stuff, they're getting red fuel prices back, plus VAT again, of a kind of £1.30 figure. I mean, that's just ridiculous. That's where white was about 3 weeks ago, including the VAT. So yeah, absolutely, and that's the 20% VAT. So absolutely crazy prices out there for red at the moment. Seems to be massively inflated, the red price, even more so than what the white price is. And of course, because of not a lot of people use red, although it equates to, I think, something like, 15 or 20% of our overall fuel use or something. So it's quite a large market, but most people think the price, the totem pole price is the one that that's the one that gets the headlines. That's the one everyone talks about. But actually, I think it's worse for those of us who use red at the moment. The price inflation there has been crazy. So anyway, it's going. So reality is, who cares about red? We've got less than a month now to decide what we're going to do with these fuel bowsers, what we're going to do with our machines, and how we're going to run things, because there's big changes coming. Now, the implications of this change, removal of red diesel, is it's somewhat straightforward. Obviously, cost is an initial one that comes to mind, and you think, oh, this is going to be a whole load more expensive than what I've been previously paying. But actually, I don't think that's the biggest one, because, as I say, when you take the 20% VAT off the pump price, and you look at what it is plus VAT, and then you look at what we're having to pay for red anyway at the moment, I don't think there's a huge amount of difference there. It's almost been negated, especially by the recent fuel and gas, events that are going on around the world. There are, however, some hidden costs here, or hidden concerns. And a big one, I think, the biggest problem we're going to face is theft, because those who were that kind of type of person weren't too bothered about using red in their vans and trucks and cars, etc. when they were driving on the road or whatever. They're stealing it / even buying it, sometimes buying it legitimately and then just using it illegally on the road, which of course it doesn't have the tax to cover. It's not for road use. I mean, with white, it's going to be completely untraceable. So you're going to have machines that are, of course, left on sites. everyone's going to know that unattended machines are going to have a load of white diesel in them, and I see fuel theft becoming an issue, a wider issue across the board as prices push up towards £2 a litre on the pump. There are going to be a lot more people tempted to start stealing fuel. The lorry drivers already get it with their big tanks. They have sort of 300, 400, 500 litre tanks on the side of their lorries to get the distances they cover, and I mean it's a lot of money, isn't it? It's £1,000 worth of fuel sat there, which you can nick in under 5 minutes if you know what you're doing. So it's a real problem. And with the theft, of course, the risk of theft becomes the damage that they do in order to get the fuel, because they don't tend to be nice enough to just undo the drain bung and drain it out that way. Inevitably, it ends up your tank gets drilled or damaged, or a fault, bloody pole smashed through the side of it. And it's a real problem. And you've got Bowsers. I mean, this isn't a particularly big one that I run. I've only got small machines, but some people have got 2,000-3,000 litre Bowsers on site, and it's basically going to be a massive stash of cash for people sat there, and it's going to be very tempting for theft. What do we do about that? It's not just the cost of the fuel; it's the cost of the extra security potentially needed, or the extra effort that we're going to have to go to maybe not run Bowsers on sites and maybe take fuel. More sort of day by day. We take what we need, or people are talking about doing sort of fuel rounds where a lorry comes in the morning and fills you up, and all of this kind of stuff. I just don't know how that's going to work. Either way, it's all a lot more costly than the current setup that we generally tend to operate on construction sites. Then you've got the guys who legitimately do dual use. So that is, they work in the agricultural sector or under some of the exemptions, and also work in construction situations, or what seems to be that the line that HMRC have had to draw on this is a tricky one, and there is inevitably going to be people caught in between the two. Somebody was talking the other day about even on a farm, for example, which you would have thought would have been kind of exempt across the board. Not quite the case. If you're building a new barn, it would appear that that is construction, not farming, and therefore you have to pay white diesel in the machines used to construct that barn. Now, if you're maintaining an existing barn, and again, where does maintenance, some of these barns, virtually you take them down and start again. There is going to be a point at which, again, it's a very difficult area to draw the line on, but if you're maintaining an existing barn, you're allowed to use red because that's classed as maintenance on, existing property, etc. So you can see where, it's very tricky to try and, keep your head above board. And the same goes for the guys in forestry, agroforestry and things. There's going to be times where they're working on growing trees, and there's going to be times where they're doing straight up forestry, and there's going to be times where they're doing more arboriculture and things, which I'm not even going to get into what I've seen those guys are having to struggle with. It's going to be tough. It's going to be tough to manage, and it's going to be tough to introduce the increased costs to customers, because we're going to have to educate our customers as to why costs have gone up, and this is going to put minimum of 20% on our costs, isn't it? Directly, let alone the current fuel price inflation that we're all suffering as well. So it's going to be a tricky one to manage for sure. And lastly, I think, and a hidden kind of implication is the machines that run behind the scenes, what I call behind the scenes. So that cost of aggregate that you get is going to go up, because behind the scenes of that tipper truck delivering that aggregate, the tipper truck runs on white. It always has. It runs on the road. And apart from the fuel increase, as say with costs, it's not going to particularly go up anymore there. But you've got your guys in your quarry. You've got all the crushers. You've got the dozers. All of that side of it. The loaders, screeners, etc. Rehandling of it, because it often gets moved several times before it actually comes to your site. That's going to put an extra cost on the cost of aggregate, which has been going up anyway due to general inflation and high demand, of course. So I see that as another kind of hidden area. Same with waste and recycling. Skip costs are going to go up. Muckaway is going to go up. You've got all these machines sort of behind the scenes to, maybe your or I's construction site. Some of you guys will work in these industries. You'll know full well what goes on. But I see more costs coming, which is not ideal for us, and potential for some jobs to start being cancelled or maybe held off in the time being. But that's a whole different topic. So then we're into alternatives. What can we do about this? We know what the problems are. What are we going to do? And I've been doing quite a bit of research into what the alternatives are. Do we have to just move straight to white? Do we get that in bulk? Do we leave it on site? Do we transport it? There's a whole issue around white as it stands anyway, and how we're going to do that because of the things I've just mentioned, the implications of it. But there are some alternatives, and the government originally announced this back in 2020, the 2020 budget, and it was announced as an idea, a help to get to net zero by the 2050 date that we're currently working towards. And you just thought, the cynical person in me goes, okay, right, well, you want us to, the construction industry and others, to start kind of moving towards greener fuels, or of course completely get off of fuels altogether, or certainly carbon releasing fuels as they're seen. Now, if that was the case, you would have thought that the next couple of alternatives that I'm going to mention would have been subject to a fuel reduction, as red currently is, and they currently are as well, if you use them in off-road use. However, it's not dead clear this, but from the research I've done, it would appear that it's the use of rebated fuel in off-road plants that is the regulation change, and that would imply that even though you might use an environmentally friendly biodiesel or equivalent, and I'll mention a couple in a second, that you will now have to pay the higher 58p a litre tax on that, which of course is the main cost of this. So a couple of alternatives seem to be gas to liquid, which is made by Shell at the moment, GTL as it's known, the shorthand. It's about 5% more expensive than traditional red diesel has been, around about that kind of number. It does change, obviously, it depends how big quantities you buy it in. Basically, they turn gas into a liquid, which they can then run through a completely standard engine. It's absolutely fine for your emissions. In fact, it's in theory better on emissions and has less particle matter and some other advantages. You'd have to read up their website to really find out all the benefits. They say it burns a little bit, not just cleaner, but a little bit more efficiently. People I know who run it don't really say there's a difference, but it's certainly no worse, so that's no bad thing. What they do say though, people who have run it for a while, that it is incredibly clean, and that has been used by quite a few people to avoid diesel bug and the traditional issues we were having when they started upping the ethanol content in our red diesel, and that creating the water and biodiesel issues with diesel bug anyway. I won't go into that, it's a whole different video. So people have been using GTL for a while. It's relatively well available. Whether if we all move to it there would be enough supply of it, of course, don't know, but it is an alternative. It's a bit of a greener alternative, a little bit more expensive, and of course it would only be any good to move to if, let's face it, it was cheaper than white diesel. And as it stands, it doesn't look like we're going to be able to do that, because it sounds like it's going to be under the higher fuel tax. So GTL, it's an option. The other one is HVO, stands for hydro-treated vegetable oil or something, very similar to that. Essentially, generically termed the biodiesel. It's made out of vegetable fats, animal fats, etc. Now, there's some other advantages to this, other than its sort of it's essentially a biodiesel. Again, you'd have to read the fuel website. I'm no fuel expert here, but the main points are it's about 10 to 15% more expensive than a standard diesel, mineral oil diesel, and to me, therefore, it's not really going to be an option, is it? Again, it's probably going to be looking very likely to be subject to the higher tax. So I could, maybe we could have started moving to it if it was on the cheaper rate. Doesn't look like that's going to happen. So it's an option, but not really one that we're going to use, is it, guys? Of course, third one's electric. I don't see it in big machines, I really don't, but it's an option. Some small machines are now starting to be produced electric, and I can see some applications for those, probably good in basements. I've done some work myself within hospitals, and we've tracked machines down essentially hospital wards, and worked in courtyards. I could see electric working quite well for that kind of application. Is it going to be something that I'm going to do? Am I going to be plugging a mini digger into a customer's house? Who pays for the electric, especially as that goes up? I just can't see it. I can't see it working really. And the cost of them, they're nearly twice the cost of a standard machine. I don't think that's going to be the way the industry is going to go. And as you scale up the machine sizes and you get to, 15 tonners, 20 tonners and above, the battery capacity you need just is unsustainable to last at what is known as a working day. So I can't see it being an option for us personally. The other one is hydrogen, which I know JCB are making some very big inroads with. They did some great work, and there's been a couple of other YouTubers. Harry's Garage or Harry's Farm, you might have seen, has done a really good video. Did the same video on both his channels, depends on what you're interested in, if you're into cars or not. Had an interview with Bamford about it. I really like their thinking, and they're pushing what I think in a direction that I could see feasibly we could work with. There's two ways you can do hydrogen. There's a hydrogen fuel cell way, which you may well have heard of, and they, through an electrolysis, I'm having to go back to my schoolboy chemistry here, so it wasn't one of my favourite subjects, but essentially through some kind of electrolysis, you convert hydrogen into electricity, which is stored in a battery, which is then used to power a motor which drives the machine. That's one way of doing it. Incredibly expensive. There's a very, very thin membrane of something that does this fancy trickery of converting actual hydrogen, removing electrons and that kind of stuff. Essentially, you're turning hydrogen, you're removing an electron and making it, I think, pair with oxygen, which is what makes water, H2O. So again, we'll have to get a chemistry expert on for this one, but that's a very expensive way of doing it, and I don't think it's the way they're going to go. The way JCB are pushing, and this is a very interesting idea, is they want to use essentially hydrogen like you would with LPG. You might remember in the early 2000s that's quite a big thing to do, to convert your Range Rover or your Jag to LPG. They're now looking to use a standard combustion engine in the same way, converting it to hydrogen. Runs at a higher compression ratio, so a diesel engine is more suited. They're essentially making a diesel engine's sort of high compression ratios, getting a spark plug in it, and you're running it on hydrogen. Few issues with it. One is the supply of that kind of hydrogen at the moment is pretty limited, but of course could be scaled up. The other is the pressure that's needed to run and be injected into the cylinder. The hydrogen in the UK at the moment isn't being supplied in that kind of pressure, so it's having to be stuck in a container, and a machine that's within a container that then up pressures it, and then it's good. Literally, you can use it like we do with diesel. Really, you're just using better compression fittings and filling your tank up that way. But otherwise, your mechanics have got a standard engine. It's probably the way we're going to go. Can do a full day on a tank. It's very similar to how we operate and use the machinery we have. So, in conclusion, I haven't got a solution to this because there is so many ways that we will use our machines and our equipment. I have no idea how some of these guys can run their kit, especially in the dual use area. They're saying about flushing tanks out, before you put your white back in. I just don't see it really being a workable solution. But if that's what we have to do, it's the way we're going to have to go. Or those kind of projects are going to be run on white diesel because it's just easier to manage. So for me personally, I think the end of the Bowser days are over. There's no point in storing large amounts of fuel. The theft risk is too much. I run small kit, and I'll be basically probably ending up one of them small little tanks in the back of the truck, sub 100 litres, and running my kit that way, I guess. It's the best I can think of as a solution for now. I've advised all my customers, I did so about 2 months ago, about price increases, and that was before the cost of fuel's gone up, so I may even have to revise that again. But this is where we are. Interesting situation, but I thought I'd do a bit of a video. Keen to hear what your thoughts on it are. People are trying to put a petition up at the moment to try and stop this, but we're less than 3 weeks away now from the deadline as it stands, and I think this is all too late. We've had 2 years to do something on this, and it's where we are now. We're not going to change this at all. So until there's some realistic alternatives, and I don't see any on the near horizon certainly, we're going to have to come up with a solution for running our vehicles largely on white diesel in this instance. Anyway, thank you for watching. Look forward to making more videos in the future, hopefully about a topic that is slightly more positive than this one. But it's a big challenge, and I thought it needs talking about, so happy to have a discussion in the comments. Thank you very much, guys.